Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us this afternoon. Also, before starting with the presentations, many thanks for the organization for the opportunity of developing this session in the context of the Caffisman Project under the umbrella of Too Big to Ignore. So first of all, I would like to start sharing my screen. I will start now sharing my screen. Okay, I assume that you all can see my screen. I would like to start sharing with you. I will move this one, sorry. I would like to start this afternoon sharing with you which is the plan for the event. We have split the presentation for this event into three different parts. In the first one, we will speak with Tania Mendo and Stanis Muguerza about the spatial distribution of the small-scale fisheries, and we will develop an interactive panel with all of you. And secondly, we will discuss about the environmental impact of small-scale fishing gears. And for doing that, we will speak with Paulo Vasconcelos and Jorge Manuel dos Santos Gonçalves, following with an interactive panel. And finally, we will also speak with David Castilla and Laura García de la Fuente about the cultural heritage surrounding the small-scale fisheries. And again, we will develop with all of you an interactive panel for the discussion and for the improvement of the discussions. Finally, Marta Ballesteros will develop a summary of the event before closing it. So we will speak about different topics today. But before doing that, I would like to introduce the Caffisman Project. Caffisman Project is an European project that we started two years ago. And the main idea of this project is to improve the protection of the marine environment and the marine resources. In particular, we are developing the emphasis on providing a set of tools to improve to advance towards the ecosystem-based management of small-scale fisheries. The idea of Caffisman is to develop a set of tools that we are testing in the context of this project, but it's a set of tools that we can use in other coastal areas, in other regions, in other seas. And that is the reason why we want to share with all of you those tools in the context of this event. How are we developing Caffisman? Caffisman is built of a large number of organizations covering 28 organizations. We work as a consortium across different work packages, different tasks. But the key aspect of Caffisman is that we are developing only a large-scale study covering the whole Atlantic area. That is the reason why we think that the common agreement on the common methodologies that we are developing using this large-scale study is a good test before extrapolating those tools to other coastal areas, to other marine regions in other parts of the world. So very fast, I would like to share with you the specific aims of Caffisman that we will cover today with different presentations. The specific aims are to get new knowledge on the small-scale fisheries spatial distribution, But also, we want to analyze and we want to assess the ecological and the physical impacts on the biodiversity coming from the small-scale fisheries, fishing years. And finally, we want to provide a quantification, a monetary quantification, a monetary assessment of the cultural ecosystem services. And we will put in the future special emphasis on providing non-market assessment of the cultural heritage. Those are the three main points or aspects coming from the aims of Caffisman that we want to share this afternoon with all of you across the different presentations that will be developed by the panelists. This is an interactive session, and how can you speak with the different panelists? First of all, you can write your question into the chat that you can find in the Zoom platform. And secondly, please, you should visit our webpage. We will put this webpage into the chat very soon. Because the panelists will provide written answer to all of your questions. By the end of next week, you can visit the webpage because you can find the answers to all your questions, together with a summary of the event in the different languages. This is the first way to participate into the event, with your questions into the chat. But in addition, we will develop 3 interactive panels, as we have already seen into the program. And the way of taking into account this kind of interactive session is as following. We will provide to all of you a link into the chat. So click the link, read the corresponding question, and then you can vote the answer you prefer the most, or that you consider that is the most interesting according to the question. A second option is when there is an open question coming from us. In that case, you only have to click here to add an opinion, and a short opinion, an open opinion in relation with the question. So all of you can take part this afternoon into the interactive sessions that we expect to develop with all of you. So thank you very much. And now, yes, I think that we can start with the first part of the event with Tanya and with Stanis, and you can start sharing your screen if you want. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to talk to you a bit today about the sort of tools that we're using and that we're further developing as part of the Caffisman Project. And first of all, we always start with the question, why do you need to collect spatial data, for example? It can give you good information about where your fisheries are, which areas are more valuable, maybe some information about the effects of other users or of users on fishers, or of fisher on other activities in the area. Maybe some information about the long-term changes in distribution of fishers, and also about the impact on the ecosystem that the fishers might be having, right? There's many ways to collect this sort of information. You can do interviews, participatory mapping, aerial surveys, in situ gear counts, but this usually provides you with a snapshot of information. But now there are several tracking systems as well that will add that temporal component to your spatial data. Some of these devices are, for example, devices that transmit data via satellite. So for example, vessel monitoring systems. Usually these systems are associated with sending data every 2 hours, maybe every 1 hour you get a location of the vessel, in usually best case scenario every 30 minutes. So usually these vessel monitoring systems, or VMS, are not used that much in small scale fisheries, if at all. Another option is the automated identification systems, IAS, and there's 2 different types, class A and class B, that transmit with different frequencies. AIS works usually via radio signal, and so there's a few issues associated with the transmission when you, for example, have a coastline that has mountains, for example, and there's not a straight line of transmission between the vessel and the antenna on land, for example. And then you have other tracking systems, such as mobile phone applications and other small trackers that are increasingly being used as well in small-scale fisheries around the world. Summarizing just a little bit about these systems, what we know so far. Vessel monitoring systems are generally too expensive for small-scale fisheries. With regards to AIS, it's a valid tool, and there's sometimes you can get some information because some fishing vessels already have AIS installed, so you can use that to complement or to get some information about spatial activity of your fleet. But in many areas, there's no reception, so that's something that we need to keep into account. AIS can also be turned off, and this happens quite frequently. But AIS is actually a device that was thought for safety of fishers, so they can transmit their position to each other. So it's an anti-collision device, really. So if we're to prioritize safety in small-scale fisheries, then there might be an issue with using AIS for that. And there's these other local systems that are proving more and more adequate to small-scale fisheries. So imagine you have a system, whichever system you end up using or you have right now in your small-scale fishing fleet. So these are examples of what they could look like. So we have a trip there of a Scottish pot and trap vessel, for example, on the left, and on the right-hand side, you can see in Peru how we've used an app to look at shrimp trawling activities. But that's the figures that you usually see, but when you actually start working with this data, what it actually looks like is, for example, in the left-hand side figure in the bottom, you have points in land, right? You have points somewhere, sometimes even in completely different regions for some reason. You have incomplete trips, which might be due to some issues with transmission, and you have different resolutions of the data, and the frequency of transmission of your device might not be enough, for example, to detect a fishing activity. That's especially the case for small-scale fisheries, because some of our fishers or some of our artisanal fishers, for example, might be just fishing or hauling pots for a couple of minutes. So if your device gets data in a different frequency, you really will not be able to pinpoint when fishing was occurring in this particular trip. So again, very rapidly summing up, the main take-home messages for data collection are, so far there's no automated process available for data cleaning. So for example, for large-scale fisheries, you have VMS tools, you have VMS base and different things, but there's a lot of these criteria in these packages or software that don't apply to specific small-scale fisheries. So it's very fishery specific, but there's some common rules. For example, you eliminate data that is inland, you eliminate data that might be right in port, although sometimes you have issues when you don't exactly know positions of ports, or when, for example, some small-scale fishers live from a beach, so there's no rule about where port is, for example. You need to decide on your sampling frequency. So if you are thinking about, start to collect data, this type of data from your fisheries, you need to know how your fishery operates, how long do they fish for, and then decide, okay, if we want to identify when fishing is occurring, we need to take into account this frequency of when things are happening. And then in order to infer the fishing activities, you can use different things like speed thresholds, for example, and there's also code available online for free to basically run some code in R, or this statistical package, and infer fishing activities. I just wanted to show you an example of, for example, where we have found that errors occur when you're trying to identify fishing activities. So in this figure in black, you can see when fishing activities are occurring. In this case, it was hauling of pots and traps. And in red was the results from a model that was inferring when fishing was occurring. So in black is when the model and the reality are the same, so that's good. But in red are the mistakes, and the mistakes were, for example, because the fishers stopped. The fishers were hauling, but then they also stopped and started banding lobster claws, for example. They also had to repair pods or some ropes at some point, so the model thought that was also fishing. They were fishing for bait, which is still fishing, but not the fishery that we were looking at inferring where they were fishing. And I work a lot with British fisheries, so the occasional cup of tea has also been an issue. Then we have what we can do with this data. I thought it would be good to show you some of the outputs that you can get. So you can, if you have these devices, you can know, for example, the number of days that they're going fishing, the number of active vessels on a particular day or per year, and the distance traveled per trip, for example, as a new estimate of fishing effort, right? So in the figure on the left-hand side up, you can see one of these fishing trips, and you can see one of our models identifying hauling of traps. So in red, you can see when the fishers are actually pulling up the traps to the vessel. But in these fisheries and in this in many passive or static gear fisheries, effort wouldn't be defined as the time that they spend hauling, but maybe the numbers of creels, for example, that they deploy, or the length of a net that they used. So we've been trying to develop methods to estimate sort of what the number of creels or traps is depending on, for example, that distance hauled. So here we have two different models that try to predict, for example, the number of creels when they're targeting lobsters and crabs, and the number of creels that they're using when they're targeting langoustines, for example, because it all depends on the distribution of the pods, how many pods they put per 100 meters or so. So we're trying to find ways of estimated, at least some rough estimate of the number of creels they're using in a fishing trip. Another example of looking at effort, on the left-hand side, you can see, for example, a trip of a fishery using bottom gillnets in northern Peru, and using, again, fancy models, we've identified that the blue line is when they are recovering the net. So we're trying again to estimate that distance of the net as a measure of fishing effort as well. And for the trolling shrimp fishery in Peru, we did the same, but in this case, because it is an active gear, we can use, for example, time fishing as a good measure of effort. So just to show you some of the things that you can start getting when you are using this sort of tracking devices. And with this information, if you start getting more vessels involved over time, you can start looking at, for example, fishing intensity or the main fishing grounds. This figure here is from the artisanal hake gillnet fishery in Peru. And basically what the fishers wanted was to show to government the main areas that they were fishing were beyond the area designated for inshore fishers, basically. So so onshore, so to the right of that yellow line is the area that is actually protected for artisanal fishers in Peru, where commercial large-scale vessels cannot go in. But all their fishing activities, as you can see, are actually occurring outside this 5 nautical mile limit. So fishers wanted to show, and what best way to show this than with a figure like this. But it's not all just about, for example, the main fishing grounds or the most of where they spend most of their time fishing. It's also about how many people can depend on a certain location. So in this case, we try to estimate the number of vessels that were using a specific ground or a specific place around a small area in Scotland. And just like as a measure of, okay, how many people actually depend on this cell, let's not look at the effort spent, but the number of people. So you can start thinking about different measures of how to look at this data and how to include maybe some socioeconomics into the equation. And last but not least, this is about how to represent this data and how to give this data back, right? Because this is fishers data, and this is just an example of a user-friendly interface. So basically, the data that we were producing also was available to fishers to see where they were going fishing. So it's an easy way of visualizing your data, but also showing it back, giving it back to the fishers. So to summarize, my main take-home messages about these presentations are there are technologies ready to collect spatiotemporal data. I mean, we have different things starting from mobile apps to very cheap trackers to AIS if you have that. So there's the technology is ripe and ready for this. This data can inform estimates of fishing effort. They represent fishers in space. You can identify fishing grounds, among other things. There's a potential to create these platforms to improve fisher engagement and to facilitate discussions between fishers, other stakeholders, and planners as well. And it's a really good way and a really good alternative to give information back to fishers and incorporate them better into a management approach, a co-management approach. And thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Tanya, for the presentation. And now, as you can see in the chat, I have shared a link to the idea board platform. So there you can find 3 questions that we have prepared for this specific block. And yeah, I can see that some people started to fill in the questionnaire, so that's good news. So the first question is in relation to the if tracking devices being used to collect spatial temporal data from small scale vessels are used in your country. You have 5 options there. The first one is that you are not aware that they are using this kind of devices. The second one is that there is not coverage. The third one is that the coverage is lower than 5. The fourth one is between 5 and 25% of coverage. And the fifth one is more than 25% coverage of the fleet. So please choose the option that you consider it's the correct one for your country or region. We will give 2 minutes for each of the questions. Yeah, I can see that people are filling in. Yeah, great. I don't know, Tanya, if you can go to the link because and then share the screen for everyone, and we can see the main results. For the first question, it seems that there is some coverage. We have 5 positive answers with less than 5% of now 6 with less than 5% of coverage, and 5 with mid coverage. So it seems that at least there is some coverage in most of the countries. That's great. And yeah, if we move to the second question, it's yeah, about the most important benefits that we can obtain tracking these small scale fisheries based on these devices. So as you can see in the panel, there are also 5 options. Now the boats are more divided, are more diverse. But it seems that the main ones are to try to estimate the effort for these fisheries. That is a big issue due to the limitation that we have coming from other data sources that we use, for example, logbooks, sail notes, or this kind of data sources. So it's effort, fishing effort is one of the most important benefits. Also, it's very important now that this marine spatial planning is a hot topic. And of course, the fifth one that is trying to identify the main fishing grounds for these fisheries. So it seems that these 3 questions are the most important ones based on your answer. And the third one is an open question, and this is a really interesting one for us to give to have your feedback on it. And the question is about what are the main challenges to use of tracking devices for the management of this fleet. So yeah, we have right now we have only one answer. So I encourage you to provide us more feedback on this one, because as it's an open question, we also consider that the feedback from participants is also very important. So yeah, I can see that now we have a second one. So I think that we can give 2 minutes to this one, because probably people need some time to write their answers or their opinion on this. So great. Yeah, that's true. It's one of the first one is about I think that one of the challenge is to try to convince fishermen to use this kind of devices, and it's related with the first answer about the afraid of the fishermen about using these devices if they are used for control instead of for science, let's say. So yeah, we all are aware about this problem. But it's also true that there are benefits for them. If I think that in the second one, to try to empower in fishers, if we want to do that, I think that it's very relevant to have good information from these fisheries for management purposes. So yeah, I can see that that option, if we use a closed system, we can avoid at least this AIS problem, that is that in many different web platforms it's quite easy to identify where fishermen are fishing. So that's one of the difficulties that we found using this AIS system. So a closed system could be a good option. As Tanya said, there are many institutes and also companies now working with this kind of devices adapted to this kind of fleets, and in most of the cases the system uses closed. So I think that it's better than the AIS. Yeah, because the other one that fishermen don't want others, it's mentioned. They mention recreational fleets to see them. It's also true, but again, we are thinking if the possibility of being identified using this kind of webs. So again, if we use this closed system, this problem should be avoid. And that's the other challenge that I fully agree is that to manage the data that will be produced by these devices. I think that now during the last year, it seems that many institutes started collecting this kind of data coming from these devices. So probably in a few in the next years, we will have more outputs from different researchers, and I think that we will have also some feedback about what implies to manage this amount of data that, assuming that in many of the countries, the number of vessels is quite relevant, this will be a big issue, and how different scientists are solving this kind of problem. But it's true that, for example, we in Caffisman, we are also working on specific tools, R codes, for example, that could be very useful to manage when working with this kind of data. So we hope that Caffisman will be also providing some solution to this issue that is mentioned there about the management of the data. Sorry. Yes, so yeah, I think that those are the main outputs from the participants. So
yeah, can I just add something?
yes, of course, Tanya. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I see a comment. Show the added value of knowing what we already know. Where do we fish? I mean, yeah, of course, fishers know where they fish. That's never been a question. It's just that sometimes, from the experience that I have, for example, when the fishers have wanted to be tracked, is when they need to prove something to government usually, and it's when there's a new development offshore, or when they are trying to prove that some area needs to be protected for them. Then a lot of the times, unfortunately, there's been this what do we say, response from government, but show me where you fish. I need data. You cannot just say, yes, I fish there, or whenever I'm trying to do something there. And in that case, really having these tracking devices can show or prove, with evidence base. And what government is increasingly requiring is this highly resolution spatial data of small-scale fisheries activities. That's one of the main reasons that we've had that for artisanal fisheries in Peru. We've had that in a specific area in Scotland. We've had, just to say another case, we've had fishers that wanted to get, they had a lot of issues with conflict with other fishers, and they wanted to reach some sort of spatial and temporal agreement in use of areas, for example. So tracking fleets and showing everyone, look, this is where the majority of you are fishing. Can we now start thinking about something? Sometimes it's easier when you have a whole picture of everything together, to facilitate discussions as well. I mean, I just wanted to add that because I understand that comment.
Yeah,
definitely.
thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya, because we have to finish. And yes, I have included my own view. That is the last comment. That is also the better knowledge of different interactions between fishermen and also with other users of the marine space. That probably, if we have this kind of data, it will improve these interactions between different users of the maritime space. So thank you very much, Tanya. And now we move to the second block.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you are hearing me well. So first of all, I would like to thank the opportunity that was provided by TBTI for us to present our work being developed within the framework of the project Caffisman. And in this particular case, I will present the tasks that are being developed within the framework of a specific work package, which is work package 5, And our presentation is titled Multi-Criteria Evaluation Matrix for Assessing the Potential Impacts of Small-Scale Fishing Gears. So in this work package, we aim overall to assess the impact induced by the small-scale fishing activity on the Atlantic and coastal ecosystem, and this covers mainly three types of main objectives and actions. The first is to develop a joint method, a common methodology to assess the impacts induced by small-scale fisheries on coastal ecosystems. The second, which will be the main focus of this presentation, is to score and rank the small-scale fishing impact depending on the type of fishing gear and depending on the type of marine habitat. And finally, to propose potential mitigation measures aiming to minimize ecological impacts induced by small-scale fishing. So, in order to achieve these goals, this part of our project pursues different specific tasks. The first was to use the database EU-Fleet Register in order to define the characteristics of small-scale fishing segments in each country, which each project partner has done in order to identify the main types of fishing gears that are employed by the small-scale fishing segments in their countries. Afterwards, it was developed a joint method, a multi-criteria evaluation matrix, which I will present today, which was developed in order to assess the main impacts that should be expected when using different types of fishing gears operated by small-scale fisheries. Then, and it's the step that we are now undertaking, we are contacting the diverse types of stakeholders, including researchers, managers, people from the fishing sector, non-governmental organizations, and others, in order to ask them to provide us their expert judgment in order to score the impacts and rank the fishing gears. Finally, we aim to identify and map the main types of habitats that might be potentially impacted by the small-scale fishing activity. So let's start presenting our multi-criteria evaluation matrix. This task of the project is already completed, and it aims to develop and test matrix that intends to be as broad as possible and to cover a wide variety of types of fishing gear. It will score the potential impacts eventually caused by the different types of fishing gears, separated into three separate components: physical and chemical components, biological and ecological components, and fishery components. Within each of these groups, several different types of impacts will be assessed and evaluated. For instance, within the physical and chemical component, we will score the potential impact caused in terms of bottom degradation or destruction, depending on the type of bottom, if the fishing gear is operated or is in contact with hard bottom, soft bottom, biogenic bottom, the eventual remobilization of pollutants, the increase of water column turbidity, the potential enrichment of nutrients in the water column, the production of litter, namely solid waste and plastic, which is a quite important parameter that we also want to assess, the fuel consumption by the fishing boat, and the corresponding production of gases, and also the production of noise during the fishing operation. Integrated within the biological and ecological component, we aim to assess potential impacts at several different levels, assess and quantify, namely in terms of damage on threatened and protected habitats, in terms of the bycatch of threatened and protected species, the bycatch of and also the bycatch of non-commercial species. Regarding the impacts induced by the fishery itself, we want to quantify and score the potential impacts induced at these levels. Discarding of target species, discarding of other bycatch species, potential conflicts with other fishing gears, and namely in terms of conflicts for the use of the space or exploitation of similar resources, and finally in terms of ghost fishing. All these 16 different types of impacts that we are going to assess will be classified in terms of their frequency, severity, proportion, and duration. So depending on the type of gear and depending on the type of habitat where this gear is operated, we will classify the frequency of occurrence of the expected impacts, its severity, and then, depending on the type of impact, the proportion that it causes and the duration that is expected from this type of impact. Each one of these types of impacts will be scored in terms of percentage and will range between, as we can see here in the bottom, depending on the percentage achieved by each type of these fishing impacts, it will reach from 0, and very high with a very high impact, which is considered an impact that scores above 50%. Besides this numeric, classification, we have also drawn a series of red lines in certain types of impact that we consider highly sensitive. So we draw red lines in terms of impacts, the type of degradation and destruction of biogenic bottoms, damage of threatened or protected habitats, bycatch of protected species, bycatch of non-commercial species, and within the fishery, we consider also highly sensitive the items related with discards of target species, discard of bycatch species, and obviously the subject of ghost fishing. These red lines, if any of these items scores above the percentages that are presented below, the fishing gear is instantaneously classified as having a medium impact, a high impact, or a very high impact, depending on the percentage that is scored in each one of these particular items that we have classified as red line in terms of gear impacts. Currently, immediately after closing the evaluation matrix, our colleagues from SETMAR have established a scheme for stakeholder elicitation possibilities. They have produced and designed a decision tree that will help us to establish the contacts with the stakeholders that will provide us with their expert judgment whenever filling the evaluation matrix. At this present moment, we are already on the terrain, filling the evaluation matrix, following the perceptions and the expert judgment by specific stakeholders, and we aim to finish this task hopefully before the summer. Regarding the next tasks within this particular work package of the project, the next step will be to identify and map the habitat potentially impacted by the small-scale fishing activity, and finally, hopefully, we wish to propose some potential mitigation measures aiming to minimize small-scale fishing impact. Overall, what we aim to do at the end of this work package is to overlap different layers of information coming from fishing impacts, coming from spatial and temporal distribution of fishing effort, and coming from habitat mapping, which will provide us a broader and wider view of the situation regarding the small-scale fisheries in each partner country within the project Caffisman. And It's all for now. I thank you for your attention. And now the session will be handled by my colleague George, that just like in the previous presentation, will provide you a link to the chat room where you can answer some questions regarding this specific presentation. Thank you all for your attention, and thank you for the opportunity provided by Too Big to Ignore.
Good afternoon. We have also 3 questions. I already inserted the link, and you can see our 3 questions about these impacting issues. The first one is, should low impact gears to be favored in the access to fishing areas, resources? So this is the first, and is a closed question. In fact, we have already 2 different answers here. You can either vote here in just saying yes or no, but in fact we have already 2 with the justifications. It's 2 yeses, but with the justifications. And we have the second one, which is which are the benefits, compensations that could be awarded to fishermen using low impact gears? Again, we have already several answers that you can vote or insert a new answer. So it's an open question. Some of them are quite large. And the third, would you support the replication of this evaluation metrics in your region, country? Where, why, and how? And this is about what Paulo was talking about, what is about the matrix that Paulo explained before, and it is to know your opinion about it. So I will give you some minutes to answer each of the questions. There's no surprise that most of the people are voting for yes in the first one. And by the way, let's see the justification. So the first justification, let me see, yes, especially if it is in an area where it is known the existence of fragile, endangered, long-living species and habitats. Yeah, that's a good point. And the second one, however, even low-impact fisheries should have some sort of effort management, of course. About the second question, we have some distribution of the voting. So I'm going to read the first. It's access to areas where high impacting gears cannot access. So kind of a restriction of the areas for the fishing gears that have more impact. Low impact gear catch could have certification of environment sustainability and product quality. So here a certification approach. The third, lower cost for fishing licenses. So there a direct benefit for the fishers. Here be lobbied by NGOs, governmental agencies, and so on as good practice tools to extract food from the ocean, increasing the positive public perception for this gear and the seafood caught by these fishing gears. No votes, so just one person. Institutions of management and or fish selling could make campaign promoting low impact gear products. So again, a strong link with the consumers and about the consumers' perception, and more people voting on this. Environmental friendly fishing gears like clay pots, they tend to last not as long as plastic ones. So subsidize that allow the reduction of costs to replace damage lost years would be beneficial. So yes, in this case, to promote more sustainable fishing gear. In fact, these clay pots are about they are traditional fishing gears that were abandoned or almost abandoned and replaced it by plastic. And now we are doing the way around. So going back to the traditional method, which is more less impacting and more sustainable, and the governments could help on that. And last, taxes and fees paid by fishermen could be lower for low impact gear. So again, like this one, a direct benefit to the fishers. And the new one, a benefit of giving more fishing opportunities to those fleets with low impact. Yeah, sure. For the last question, we have here about the replication of the matrix. Yes, it is important to make a broad and diverse assessment of the perception of different stakeholders regarding the impact of fishing gears. I think that this evaluation should be made by a very comprehensive group of people that deal with ocean activities of their everyday work, fishermen, scientists, NGOs, etc. So a great importance to the stakeholder interactions and giving the word to the people that are more involved, and not only to the scientists, but also to the fishers, to the NGOs, administration. Second, to get a survey of experts' opinions on impacts, fishermen, scientists, administration, NGOs, both online platforms and presential questionnaires could be used. So here again, the interaction, but with some examples of how to do it. Basically online platforms and the traditional questionnaires. So no for the first question, and I think that's it. No big changes on the answers here. There's only one for the last question. Yes, we should gather the most information possible in order to improve the small-scale fisheries management. So although these metrics could or seem to be a little complex, they are very useful to understand what is going on about the impact. And we know for sure that there are gears that are more impacting than others. But we don't want to say it just from our side, but especially from the side of the fishers, to have their input on this, and also the rest of the society, of course, to have their perception as well, which I think it could be very could enrich a lot this process. Okay, so I think
the answers are being lower now, so maybe we'll close this part of our session. Thanks a lot, George, for handling this part of questions and answers. And it's time for Aranza to launch the next session. Thanks a lot, everybody. Good afternoon.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paulo and Jorge. And yes, it's time for the last part of this event with David Castillo and with Laura García de la Fuente to speak about the cultural heritage. So David, please.
Okay, thanks Arantxa for your introduction. Can you hear me? I guess you can.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So thanks Arantxa and also the Too Big to Ignore partnership to give us the opportunity to be here. I am David Castillo and I'm going to show you together with my colleague Laura García de la Fuente. Wait a sec, I'm going to share my screen. Here it is. Okay. One of the tools produced in Caffisman for sustainable management of a small-scale fishery in the Atlantic area of Europe. The tool consists of a reference database on cultural heritage related to fisheries in this area. This tool is produced in the framework of Caffisman working practice on the evaluation of cultural and natural heritage of fisheries that has counted with the contribution of researchers that are part of the team that involves Caffisman partners from Spain, University of Huelva, University of Oviedo and Indurot, and AFTI, the United Kingdom, CEFAS and the University of St. Andrews, Ireland, the Ireland Seafood Development Agency, Portugal, the University of Algarve, and France, we make an IFREMER. Before placing our hands on deck, we would like you to consider a quotation from Albert Einstein. We cannot solve our problem with the same thinking we used when we created them. Well, current small-scale fisheries problems, let's say biological overexploitation, socioeconomic and sustainability, and the small-scale fisheries disappearance in the worst case, are the consequence of a certain way of thinking that has historically biased policymakers' decisions of the management of these fisheries that cause the underestimation of their real value. It is time to change our way of thinking to solve fishing problems. It is necessary to do some kind of regime shift that goes from the focus on biological issues of fisheries to focus on them together with social and economic ones, that goes from the consideration of fisheries isolated to the consideration of them together with multiple competing uses of the seas, like tourism, transport, industry, or from the consideration of fisheries as just food provision to the consideration of other services like cultural heritage or cultural services or the regulation of marine ecosystems. We certainly think the scientific community now is moving in this direction, despite there is still a long way ahead. This regime implies the advance towards the ecosystem-based management approach of a small-scale fishery that would allow us to identify the trade-off between different uses of the sea, the consideration of ecosystem service, but only food provision, and finally, attain the real total economic value of small-scale fisheries. The tool we are presenting in this talk is going through one of the ecosystem services generally ignored or unless underestimated when approaching small-scale fisheries. This is cultural services. These are the non-material benefits people attain from small-scale fisheries: cultural heritage and identity, cognitive benefits, leisure and recreation, or even feel-good or warm glow. The reference database we are introducing today identifies references and multimedia material that register the tangible and intangible expression of this cultural service related to fisheries, the cultural heritage. This database classifies cultural heritage according to UNESCO criteria and some other thematic typologies related to fisheries to advance in the identification and ultimate evaluation of it for policymakers and other stakeholders. This slide allows us showing you quickly what we are talking about. We can classify cultural heritage, intangible and intangible cultural heritage. Regarding tangible cultural heritage, we can distinguish between immovable and movable. Some expressions of immovable tangible cultural heritage are mainly buildings related to fisheries activity. We have some examples here, like the Weymouth Historic Fish Market that has been harbor site landmark of over 150 years in the United Kingdom, or Hermanos Concepcion Historic Canning and Salting Factory in Ayamonte, which is a remaining of a small pelagic canning and salting factory in Ayamonte, Spain. Another example of cultural heritage, tangible cultural heritage, that movable tangible cultural heritage is, for instance, the paintings of Paul Henry launching the Corra, which describe 5 fishermen launching a Corra for a beach set on Ashall Island, County of Mayo in Ireland. These are expressions of tangible cultural heritage, but when we are talking about cultural heritage related to fisheries, we have a big, of big importance, what we call intangible cultural heritage. Particularly, we have different examples, classifications of them. Following UNESCO criteria, we can consider oral traditions and expressions like the Molly Malone song that describe female shellfish sellers selling cockles and mussels along the streets of Dublin, or social practice, rituals and festive events like Les Fêtes de la Mer de Cap-Breton, which is a festival of the sea that is celebrating during the weekend in the beginning of the fishing season, and is a place where is located a small-scale fishery composed of 19 boats that bless it in a religious ceremony the possibility to fish in the 60s. Another expression of that would be, for instance, the Festival Gastronomico of Bordeaux, which is a gastronomic festival that relies on traditional cooking dishes and food that were used during on-board life on fishing vessels. There are other expressions like performing arts. Could be, for instance, the Sikura rowing race in Ireland, or knowledge and practice concerning nature and the universe, like the McNamara Macana Natalma landmark, which is a method for orientation and navigation at sea in Ireland, which is a traditional technique that has been passed from generation to generation and which continues to the present day. Another expression of this knowledge and practice concerning nature and the universe would be certain fishing gears like the alcatruz that take advantage of the knowledge of the biological behavior of octopus to look for shelter in the bottom of the sea. Finally, there are also expressions of traditional craftsmanship, like the use of the arte of the fishing gear of shabega, which is an old traditional fishing technique that used to be practiced along the entire Portuguese continental coast. These are examples of cultural heritage, and what we are doing in our database is just identifying and classifying all these heritage to allow us to evaluate that and to consider the importance of this on the different small-scale fisheries we have in the Atlantic area. Now it's time to plan, to place, to see how we can carry out this sort of data searches in our database. So let me share a screen with the database here. Okay, so I'm going to just give you an example of how it is working. Let's go through an example of knowledge practice concerning natural and the universe and traditional craftsmanship in Spain, Ireland, and France, which is the stone fishing tidal weirs. The database is organized so that we can look for insight according geographical criteria using node-free classification or geographical classification of the European Union. And we could find, for instance, in the case of Spain, for the coast of Cadiz, which is ES 612, a sample of knowledge and practice concerning nature and the universe. Let me see here the tag here, and that are also examples of tradition and craftsmanship. So if we go through here, then we can find information of corrales, which is the name of these stone fishing tidal weirs, which are samples of the categories of traditional craftsmanship and knowledge and practice concerning nature and the university that support also tangible cultural heritage, which is represented by the stone walls that are used for this. This way of fishing is mainly represented by the handmade wall that has been used by human as tidal trap since the ancient times in all the Atlantic coast. So here is an example of a reference that talk about that in the case of Andalusia, of Florido del Corral. There are also a database of historical heritage in Andalusia that talk about this sample of fishing tidal weirs. And additionally, we can have also multimedia material by Canal Sur, which is a television channel in Spain that could provide us also information about this kind of fishing technique in the case of the Gulf of Cadiz. So here there is, for instance, a video of Canal Sur that is talking about this coral. It's going a little bit slow, but this will be one example. We can also, I'm going to stop this because it's going to begin talking. It is also possible to find this kind of fishing tidal weirs in other areas of Europe. Let's say, for instance, that instead of Spain, we can go through Ireland. So if we go to, for instance, E042, it's not this here.
David, 1 minute, please.
Yes. Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is an example of how to use this database to look for it. Another example could be, for instance, if we look for, in the case of social expressions, we can go to SOC. Let me check, I'm sorry. Laura could talk about this and then continue with the interactive panel. So, SOC.
Okay, thank you, David.
Yes.
I think we are out of time, so just some examples of the classification of a very important element of our heritage in Spain, which is fishermen guilds. It's a typical form of association for fishermen, especially for artisanal fishermen. And in our database, you can see in the screen a sample of registers of elements who has been compiled to describe this kind of element, who is one of the most important element of social practices, forms of collective socialization. Here you can see some examples, but I think with this we can close the presentation and go to the ideas board.
Okay, so the ideas board is here. This is the let's go through to Zoom. I'm sorry. Let me see how. Stop sharing here. So, did you put the link, Laura?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to share the screen and the data boards. Here. Okay, so we have 3 questions for you. The first is what you think, if you think this reference database on cultural heritage of fisher should be replicated beyond the Atlantic area in Europe. You can just say yes or not. Additionally, we have another question. Do you think policymakers will succeed at managing the seas and ocean without accounting cultural values? And finally, we have another question that is about who is going to finance this. I mean, if we want to protect cultural heritage, for sure, the conservation and preservation implies some money for that. So there are many options to finance that. So if you have A, B, C, or D, you just vote it. But if not, you can add another appreciation on that. Okay, so if you, as far as I see, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. It seems that most of you think that it's interesting to expand this database to other European Union areas and around the world. Additionally, I think I'll be able to transmit you that it's important to consider cultural heritage in the case of fisheries to proper manage them, so that all of you think that it's very relevant to consider that. And finally, most of you consider that public administration via taxes to coastal communities and visitors will be maybe one of the best things to approach the financing of all of this. And there are other possibilities here, included by some participants, both general taxes and some specific local fees managed by both local public administration and non-profit private organization. That would be also a very good option. So we'll combine both things depending on the service, depending on the use we are talking about. So it will be very interesting also considering this option. So I think this is all for our part. If you have any question, anything to add. Okay, so if our Marta wants to continue with the debate.
Okay, so thank you very much, and thank you all for participating in the ideas board. And if you are seeing this as a recorded video, please be aware that we understand this as the beginning of an ongoing debate with the Caffisman Project. So feel free to contact us through the sources provided before by Arantxa. Data are crucial for sustainable fisheries management, but what we have seen today is that data can be used to reinforce the voice of fishers and fisheries communities. And there is no need for expensive, highly data-intensive technology, because, as we have seen, there are already low-cost alternatives available that can be adapted to multiple contexts in different areas of the world. We have seen that the potential benefits of applying this kind of tracking devices, for instance, can be what we may call the traditional suspects. Those can be of help for estimating fishing effort, to identify fishing grounds, or even for marine spatial plannings. But according to your answers, issues like empowering fishers are not at the top of our head when using those devices. So this is an area for potential work. Even more, when we consider what are the main challenges of applying those devices. Again, the frequent suspects are equaling tracking with control instead of monitoring. So there are plenty of reluctance from fishers and fishers communities to get on board with this kind of technology. There is also this fear that the information is an asset in fisheries. So if I share the information, I am giving away knowledge that is of high value for my fisheries performance. So as we have seen from the interaction section, we can design closed systems that will avoid these kind of risks. And again, there is a enormous task for all of us involved in this area, which is to show what is the added value for fishers in using those kind of devices. There are plenty of examples, particularly when we are exploring competing uses of the sea. So those kind of information, as Tanya mentioned, can be used to say, hey, this is the area where we fish. Those are our most valuable grounds. So when you are considering other potential uses, be aware of this evidence and robust information provided by those devices. Beyond data, if we combine data and knowledge, we can create robust evidence also to address low impact fishing gear. And with that, to design systems that somehow reward the use of those gears in particular areas. According to the participation responses, you all agree that low impact fishing gears should be rewarded, but that does not equal to not having fishing effort control of those gears. Rewarding can get the form of access to areas where high impact fishing gears are not allowed, that is obvious, but you have mentioned one that is highly valuable, that is get that information to the market so we can support consumers in doing sustainable choices, saying, I am buying this product that is coming from a low impact fishing gear. Finally, if we systematically gather information and knowledge, we can give value to a critical asset of the small scale fisheries communities, such as cultural heritage. We have seen from David and Laura's presentation that that information could be at service for many of the communities in different forms. It seems clear that the model and the system that they have presented could be applicable to other areas. And it seems clear that decision makers can no longer ignore cultural heritage. But in order to not ignore it, they need to know where it is. And it means not only the tangible, easy things to see, but also the intangible ones that are also a core component on that value. In terms of who should finance this kind of cultural heritage conservation, patrimonialization, etc., there were two choices that were preferred by all participants. And those were kind of combination, of public funding through taxes and some private fees to visitors that could be combined with NGOs, private NGOs, or even fishers organizations. There are choices available and we just need to explore them. We wish we had more time to go and dig deeper in all these issues, but we are not. On the other hand, we believe that we keep a little bit eager to know more. That will be an incentive for you to get in touch with the Caffisman Project. So we all together can collaborate for the sake of the small scale fishing communities. So thank you very much for your attention, and I leave the floor to Arantxa to closing the section.
Thank you very much, Marta, for your nice summary of the event. Before closing the session, we have a couple of minutes for Tanya and Stanis, because you have a question into the chat. Perhaps Tanya and Stanis, you can open your camera again to provide answer to Ines Sousa in relation with the question. What are the main arguments to convince fishermen that having a tracking device could be a good option for the fishermen? Thank you very much, but a very brief answer, please.
Yeah, thank you, Arantxa. I think that Tanya has had to leave due to personal issues, so I will try to answer to Ines. Thank you, Ines, for the question, and at least in our case, in the Basque Country, where a high percentage of this fleet is using this kind of devices, the main argument that we are using is based on actual real cases where this fleet has been harmed because we didn't have the needed information to show managers where they were fishing. It could be the case of installing an aquaculture thing or something related with new energies. Also, we have some example with some MPAs that want to be now in our cost they are deciding when to put an MPA, and based on the information that we have, there will be some limitations in some cases, and some vessels will be affected if this MPA is implemented, for example. So we are using this kind of real examples that they know that they have been harmed due to this lack of information, and I think that this is the best way to convince them, that show them that the information that we collect from these devices, as we said, is to empower them, especially in the coastal areas where we can see that we have now a lot of new users in this space that in the past, I would say that most of them were fishermen. So that could be probably the main argument. I don't know if I've been able to respond to Ines briefly.
Yes, thank you very much, Stanis. As I have commented at the very beginning of the event, any other question that you want to pose, we will be able to give also answer through our web page. And now I will start sharing again my screen. I think that you can see now my screen. Sorry, let me. So just before starting our weekend, a last message for all of you. This is a starting point. We wish you to continue with the Caffisman connection, and how is the way in which we can establish that collaboration in the close future and in the long future also. You can visit our web page. We will put, if any of the partners can put at this moment into the chat the web of the project. You can visit because there is a special area concerning this event, the event under the umbrella of Too Big to Ignore, the organizer of this fantastic week of events. You can visit in the web, and in addition, you must know that we will organizing other events this month, at the end of this month and early next one, in the context of the European Maritime Day in different countries, in Ireland, in Portugal, and in Spain. So please, you can follow us using Twitter. You can see the Twitter account, and you can also see the information about those new events again in our webpage. We hope that all of you have enjoyed this event. And I hope to see you again next year. And I don't know if we have 3 more minutes before finishing this event. I don't know if you want to pose any additional question. I will check again in case there is any question. Okay, no more question. If so, I see that nobody else want to ask anything. So Thank you again to Ratana and to the whole Too Big to Ignore supporting team. Thank you very much for the technical support when developing this event. And please, if you want, all the panelists, open your camera for the last time. Thank you to all of you, all the panelists. And yes, you are coming. Thank you very much to all of you. So thank you, and we hope to be in touch, all the panelists, with all of you, and for sure with Too Big to Ignore, with a special mention to Ratana for the high effort when organizing this event. And nothing from my side. I must say that I hope to see all of you in the next event and visiting our webpage. So thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.